you think gay men are misogynistic?
Yes.
A lot of y'all women are homophobic.
A lot of gay men are misogynistic.
Women are more homophobic than men.
Some gay men need to learn the difference between being sassy and being sexist.
Listen, there's no point in me trying to offer you a soft lead-in. I might as well just say what everybody has been thinking and avoiding. The unity between the girls and the gays has long since curdled, followed out by the slow creep of misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and the way we've all learned to wound each other. We'll pause pretending that it's still intact. If there's any hope in reclaiming what that alliance once meant, we must confront the ugliness we've allowed to grow unchecked. So girls, gays, theys, and people of all gender appropriations and the pronouns. Let us discuss. Ello Bandannas, Khumo, Markham here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel where people watch me speak about whatever crosses my mind, and I am okay with that. You and I are going to pretend like it did not disappear for months. In fact, this video was posted just a week after my previous one, okay? Okay. In today's video, we're getting into the uncomfortable conversation of solidarity, or lack thereof, within and between queer communities and women. I have to acknowledge that this conversation is very nuanced and can be discussed in various ways, so it is a great time to remind you that comment section is yours as much as it is mine. Feel free to expand on anything I say, add your own perspectives, whatever works for you, darling. But before we continue, a quick word from our friends over at Current. So I'm sitting here pretending not to notice all the YouTube videos I still have to edit, and honestly, what better way to procrastinate than to tell you about Current? If you haven't heard about Current before, don't worry, that's literally what I'm here for. So Current is a banking app that gives you more breathing room with your money, starting with my favorite reason for switching, the paycheck advance. Once you qualify, you can get up to $750 early. It's not a loan, nothing dramatic, just early access to your own money, with the fee, of course, when you need it. They've also got other really helpful features like the Build Card, which is a secured card that makes building credit simple, safe, and actually realistic because it reports your on-time payments and helps grow your credit history. And the fee-free overdraft, up to $200. Please. You're not getting that anywhere else. There's also a savings pod with bonuses up to 4%. And you can get paid up to 2 days faster with direct deposit. If you want to try it out, use my link current.com/Khumo and use the code Khumo to get $50 when you sign up. That's free money, baby. See you at current.com/Khumo. When we talk about the girls and the gays, we need to be honest about who's actually centered in that phrase. It typically refers to cis-het women and cis-gay men and has become a shorthand for a very specific dynamic, bonding over pop culture, fashion, and entertainment. But this framing almost erases everybody else. Lesbians exist at the intersection of both identities, yet are often awkwardly shoved into whichever category feels convenient. Trans men are forgotten altogether. They're men, but not all of them are gay, and the ones that are rarely feel included in the gays, which is dominated by cis-gay men. Trans women experience trans misogyny from both straight and queer communities. Non-binary people don't fit into this binary framework at all, and bisexual and pansexual people are often treated with suspicion both by straight and gay communities. The girls and the gays framework isn't just incomplete, it's fundamentally built on cis-binary assumptions that exclude many people who should be part of these solidarity conversations. The solidarity between queer people and women has always been shaped by shared experiences of marginalization and overlapping struggles against patriarchal and heteronormative systems. During the gay liberation movement of the 1960s and 70s, feminists and the LGBTQ+ community stood together to dismantle systems that confined identities and limited freedoms. They recognized that their fights for autonomy were deeply interconnected. But even in these periods of unity, factors emerged. Some feminist factions excluded not just queer women, but trans women entirely, viewing them as threats. Gay male-dominated queer movements sidelined women's issues, lesbian visibility, and trans rights, prioritizing the fight against homophobia without fully addressing how patriarchal power, trans misogyny, and binary gender norms affect all marginalized groups. And surprise, surprise, we have not done much to fix that dynamic since. The historical intimacy within these communities was never just about shaping pop culture. I think we forget that. It was about surviving together. They built shared political movements, created safer worlds, cared for one another through crises like AIDS and reproductive battles, and forged intellectual frameworks that reshaped how society understands gender and identity. So if those before us never addressed the faults built into this coalition from the start, how did we imagine it would stay intact? Every unresolved tension grows, every unspoken resentment compounds. This was always going to spill over. It was only a matter of when. Thus, when it did spill over, the imbalance became quite impossible to ignore. Because for all the talk of unity, the labor of maintaining this alliance has never been evenly shared. So you know I'm obviously going to start with gay men. Let us talk about not pulling our weight, right? Women, queer and straight, cis and trans frequently stand at the forefront of LGBTQ plus causes, amplifying the voices of their queer allies. Trans people of all genders show up for broader queer rights, even when their specific needs are sidelined. The reverse is far less common. Cis gay men often fail to recognize the urgency of struggles that do not appear to affect them directly. Reproductive rights, for example, are often perceived through the lens of proximity, an issue that primarily affects people who can become pregnant. And cis gay men may feel distance from the stake of this fight. It is a privilege, albeit an unconscious one, to ignore an issue that does not directly affect your life, because this narrow view obscures the broader reality. The right to control one's body is a cornerstone of equality, one that impacts everyone. For gay men who have fought tirelessly for the recognition of the autonomy, the battle for reproductive rights should be an intrinsic allyship, not a peripheral cause. Women show up for us again and again. They marched with us when we fought for marriage equality, they held our hands when we demanded workplace protections, and during the AIDS crisis, it was lesbians who stood by us. They organized care networks, demanded government action, and fought for the humanity of their queer brothers. Trans women also showed up, often while facing even more marginalization and violence themselves. These people understood that the fight for justice could not be segmented. It required everyone's participation. They didn't stop and ask if it was their fight. They knew that it was. But when their lives are on the line, whether it's gender-based violence or inadequate healthcare, we're too often nowhere to be found, at least significantly. And why is that? The answer, as uncomfortable as it is, lies in our privilege. Yes, we are gay. Yes, we face homophobia and systemic discrimination. However, despite our marginalization, gay men still benefit from cis male privilege. The patriarchy doesn't punish us for being men, it punishes us for being gay. That difference matters. It grants us a freedom that women, trans men, and non-binary people rarely have access to, leading to a dangerous complacency, a belief that their issues are separate or less critical than our own. But here's the truth. Their struggles have everything to do with us. The systems that oppress them are the same systems that oppress us. White supremacy, patriarchy, toxic masculinity, rigid gender roles, and so on. These forces demand that everybody stay in their assigned place. They're not separate fights. If cis gay men fail to show up, we undermine our own liberation. But our failure isn't just about absence, it's also about the act of harm we inflict when we are present. Proximity without accountability has turned natural allies into sources of mutual harm. Gay men and women exist in each other's orbits, okay? We share spaces, friendships, pop culture, but that closeness hasn't automatically translated into mutual respect. And instead, it's created new opportunities for harm that feel particularly painful precisely because they come from people who should understand what marginalization feels like. The misogyny in gay male culture isn't just internalized or unconscious, it's often loud and defended as harmless because we've convinced ourselves that being gay exempts us from accountability. Though queer men often escape some of these stereotypes assigned to straight men, many remain socialized under patriarchal norms. I mean, we were raised to hate women in the same way that straight men were. We see this in the pressure to assert masculinity, to reject femininity. Some gay men even go as far as adopting misogynistic attitudes, deriving status from not being feminine or being the normal gaze, and reproduce sexist patterns. We've claimed the right to call women bitches. We treated the term as a term of endearment we are entitled to use. We've made women's bodies, their clothes, their weight, their attractiveness, fair game for commentary because what? We're not attracted to them, sexually attracted to them, so it doesn't count as objectification. We've touched women without consent, grabbed their breasts, commented on their bodies, all while hiding behind queerness as if it makes the violation somehow cute or harmless. We also need to confront the way that we talk about trans bodies. There's an alarming comfort in policing people's transness, expecting trans people to conform to narrow ideals, hypermasculinity for trans men, hyperfeminine passing for trans women. When they fail or refuse to meet these rigid standards, we cast them aside. We treat trans people's bodies as topics for debate, their identities as performance, their existence as optional to our solidarity. Even more revealing, I think, is the misogynistic language some use to justify the exclusion of trans men under the guise of preference, reducing them to to their genitals, refusing to see them for the men that they are, just so we can avoid them as romantic partners. The gay best friend has also become a cultural license for cruelty. Some gay men even curate their social circles to only include conventionally attractive women, treating them as social currency for gaining straight male attention. We've turned femininity into a costume we can put on and take off, performing it as parody while actual women and femme people navigate the real consequences of existing in bodies that are read as female or feminine. We've made women's pain into entertainment, their struggles into aesthetic, and when people object, when they say that hurts or that's misogynistic or that's transphobic, we get defensive. We weaponize our marginalization. I'm gay. I can't be sexist. I'm oppressed too. You're being sensitive. We demand access to spaces while offering nothing in return but entitlement. This is cis male privilege in a rainbow flag. We benefit from being cis men in ways we refuse to examine. We move through the world with safety and presumed competence that women and trans people don't have. And instead of using that privilege to uplift others, we often use it to talk over them, dismiss them, and dishonor the reality of their struggles. Lesbians have been calling out gay men for this for decades, about how we center ourselves in LGBTQ+ spaces, how we dominate pride narratives, and rarely contribute to the effort of making queer representation as inclusive as possible. Trans people have also been saying the same, that gay men benefit from trans activism and trans culture while abandoning trans people when it's time to show up for their rights, their safety, and their lives. We're now at the point where we owe more than just showing up in marches. We owe accountability, I think, for the harm that, not I think, actually I know, we owe accountability for the harm that we've caused in the spaces that we already share. But here's where the conversation expands, because while cis gay men have been wielding male privilege and perpetuating harm, straight cis women, including progressive, feminist, and supposedly allied women, have been perpetuating their own forms of violence. And if we're going to rebuild real solidarity, we need to talk about it. I need to be specific here. I am talking primarily about straight cis women. Lesbians, bi women, and trans women experience homophobia and transphobia too, but they're not the ones perpetuating most of these particular harms. There's a particular flavor of homophobia and transphobia that thrives in straight women's spaces, kind of fetishizes gay men while being deeply uncomfortable with actual queerness, the kind that wants a gay bestie as an accessory but dates a man who uses the F slur like he needs it to breed. Starting with the DL men craze going on at the moment. Listen, the girlies have discovered DL men, and like I mentioned in my DL men video, the discourse has mutated into something much uglier. Every time a woman responds to toxic male behavior, whether it be misogyny, abuse, or overall cruelty, by suggesting that that man must be DL, she's doing something insidious, taking the harm caused by straight men and redirecting it onto the queer community, making queerness itself the source of toxicity rather than holding heterosexual masculinity accountable for its own violence. The DL discourse has turned into a witch hunt. There's a trend of girls befriending gay boys for tea on their private hookups, only to weaponize that information later, or asking their gay friends to flirt with their boyfriends to test their sexuality. This is not only invasive but dangerous. What's especially insidious is how this behavior is framed as safeguarding. Phrases like, oh, I just don't want to get sick, or if my man is sleeping with other men, I deserve to know, reduce queerness to a threat and position gay men as vectors of harm. The alleged exposing my DL TikTok trend, largely driven by women pretending to be gay boys, I might add, and naming innocent men, shows how reckless this discourse has become. Dealing with DL men is genuinely dangerous. When we say that, we're not just saying that so we can feel like Tom Cruise. These are men who will protect their secrecy at any cost. Outing them, especially for clout or entertainment, is risking lives, gay men's lives. And many women would not need to fear DL men or getting with them if they did not actively contribute to the system that creates them. The assumption that any man who shows emotion, cares about fashion, has close male friendships, or doesn't perform traditional masculinity must be gay is an enforcement of rigid gender roles that harm everyone. It tells straight men that they cannot be vulnerable or expressive without their sexuality being questioned. So men bend themselves into caricatures, emotionless, stoic, performative, harmful, just to avoid being read as queer. And the gender roles that women claim to be resisting are reinforced all over again. Don't even get me started on the who gon' be the boys trend. That's just bullying gay men for existing and not performing masculinity in the way that you expect them to. It especially affects femme gays who are now bombarded with this phrase in a comment section whenever they post about themselves and their interests, making their own pages unpleasant to be visible in. This same suspicion bleeds into the aversion many women have towards dating bisexual men. Male bisexuality becomes framed not as a legitimate identity, but as a phase, a cover, or a threat. Another angle from which a man's masculinity can be doubted or his loyalty questioned. Women fear that a man attracted to more than one gender is somehow inherently deceptive or inevitably headed toward man, and that fear feeds into the broader culture of surveillance around male sexuality. Let's also talk about what straight cis women do to trans people specifically, because this is where it gets particularly ugly. They treat trans women as threats in women's spaces, bathrooms, locker rooms, shelters, sports, gyms. They reduce trans women to their bodies, interrogate their realness, demand they perform femininity perfectly, while simultaneously claiming they're doing too much. They exclude trans women from feminist spaces while appropriating their labor and language. They weaponize protecting women to justify transphobia, positioning trans women as predatory men in disguise. This rhetoric directly contributes to the violence that trans women face. Then there's a refusal to see trans men as men. They misgender and treat them as confused lesbians or lost sisters. They claim trans men are betraying women by transitioning, as if manhood is a choice made to gain privilege rather than an identity. They exclude trans men in discussions about reproductive rights, even though many trans men can get pregnant and need access to abortion and healthcare. When they do acknowledge trans men in these conversations, it's often in tokenizing ways that others trans men without centering their specific needs and experiences. Then there's a deeper conversation of turfism, largely driven by cis, often straight women who position trans people, especially trans women, as enemies of feminism. This ideology has real violent consequences. Also, what's with the rise and use of homophobic slurs among cishet women? Who you calling a punk? We're now at the place where multiple communities are replicating oppressive systems while claiming victimhood as justification. Cis gay men wield cis male privilege, straight cis women enforce heteronormativity and gender binaries, and marginalized people within these groups, lesbians, trans people, bi-pan people, non-binary people, are caught experiencing harm from multiple sides while being erased from the conversation entirely. And surely these dynamics have existed for a very long time, but why does this fracture feel more painful now than ever before? I think the answer lies largely in the digital landscape that we inhabit. Social media has dramatically reshaped how gender and sexuality are communicated, performed, and policed. Algorithms can both destabilize norms and simultaneously reinforce extreme ideologies. Recent research shows that algorithms disproportionately feed users misogynistic and transphobic content, escalating quickly from mild prejudice to extreme hate. The platforms themselves economically reward division, hate, drama, outrage. These generate engagement, solidarity, nuance, empathy, please. Nobody wants to hear about that. Those get buried. Digital spaces that might have served as meeting grounds become fracture zones, where old wounds are magnified and weaponized for profit. This is what happens when proximity replaces actual solidarity. We share spaces but not struggle. We claim alliance but not accountability. Cis gay men who dismiss others' concerns because I'm oppressed too are no different from straight cis women who dismiss concerns because women have it worse. Oppression isn't a competition. Marginalization doesn't grant immunity from causing harm. We need to be clear. The patriarchy, white supremacy, and cis heteronormativity does not care if we destroy each other as long as we're not united against them. When straight cis women blame toxic masculinity on DL men, straight cis men continue their violence unexamined. When cis gay men dismiss women's rights as not our issue, politicians strip away at bodily autonomy, affecting not just cis women, but trans men, non-binary people, and everybody else. When TERFs exclude trans women from feminism, they align with right-wing forces that want to eliminate all of us. When we erase bi-pan people, we fragment coalitions that should be united. When we're fighting each other, we're not fighting them. This is by design. Marginalized groups standing on each other is how power maintains itself, by ensuring we're too fractured to build coalitions that could actually threaten it. So how do we bridge this divide? How do we build something real out of this fractured mess? How do we reclaim what the girls and the gays once meant, not as nostalgia, but as renewed political possibility? This is where the conversation obviously turns to you in the comment section, but here are a few of my suggestions, okay? First, we stop defending harm. When a cis gay man is called out for misogyny or transphobia, but I'm oppressed too, is not an answer. When a straight cis woman is called out for homophobia or transmisogyny, but I'm a feminist, is not enough. When anyone erases marginalized people from the conversation, but I didn't mean to, isn't acceptable. Accountability means sitting with discomfort and accepting that we can be both marginalized and harmful. Second, we need to get specific about the harm we've caused. No more vague apologies or defensive explanations. Third, we stop treating solidarity as transactional. Our liberations are bound together. We literally cannot be free while others remain oppressed. Fourth, we build spaces for hard conversations. Spaces where we can say, you hurt me, without the other person immediately becoming defensive. Spaces where accountability doesn't mean cancellation. Spaces where we can sit with the complexity of being both harmed and harmful. Fifth, we show up, not just online, but in physical spaces where the work is being done. Cis gay men at women's rallies, straight cis women at rallies against anti-LGBT legislation, everybody at protests for trans rights, for trans healthcare, for protecting trans kids, for racial justice, for economic equality. We protect the few remaining lesbian spaces. We support trans-led organizations. We put our bodies where our values claim to be. Sixth, we cultivate empathy and share joy. Beyond politics, it's vital to recapture what once made the girls and the gays powerful: joy, performance, vulnerability, emotional honesty, camp, community care. Rebuilding solidarity must include cultural renewal, cross-community friendships, creative collaborations, shared spaces, mutual respect. Finally, we commit to education. Scholars, activists, community leaders across feminist and queer spheres should encourage cultural reflection on internal bias, structural privilege, and the intersections of gender, sexuality, and power. Bridging feminist theory and queer theory can help reestablish solidarity. Early queer studies emerged precisely at this intersection, recognizing that liberation requires understanding of how systems of oppression interlock and reinforce each other. But here's what gives me hope: the fact that we are even having these conversations at all, the fact that people are pushing back, calling out, and demanding better, the fact that my generation is less willing to accept these dynamics as inevitable. We know we can do better than this. We can build coalitions that don't require perfect victimhood from anyone. We can create communities where accountability and support coexist. We can recognize that fighting oppression means fighting all oppression, even especially the oppression we're tempted to perpetuate ourselves. And that is it for this week's video. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comment section below. I missed you guys so much. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Hint, hint, it's about Austin and LeGrand Wolf. Remember, if you do not slay, then you do not stay in awesome, period. Bye. See you at current.com/Khumo.